Mhm. Okay. So hello and thank everyone for joining us tonight, and thank you to Heather for hosting this Zoom. I appreciate you giving me time so we can discuss the plight of the wild horses in Theodore Roosevelt National Park. My hope is that this will help answer any questions you have, help you understand some key points we suggest you use in your comment letter, and help you use your voice to make an impactful argument to keep the wild horses in Theodore Roosevelt National Park the only home they have ever known. I'm going to ask you to be patient because we are having some technical difficulties, and so I have to do the waiting room also, which is very weird, but um, I don't know. Okay, so Theodore Roosevelt National Park is currently engaged in creating a management plan for the wild horses in their park. Hold on, I have to. Okay. So they're currently engaged in a management plan for the wild horses entrusted in their care. On December 12th, 2022, Theodore Roosevelt National Park announced their plans to eliminate the entire herd of horses from the park. Chasing Horses Wild Horse advocates immediately started pounding the pavement, and since December, we have gained a ton of support for these iconic wild horses. By the end of the last public comment period, over 19,000 people commented with overwhelming support asking that the park allow a genetically viable herd of horses to stay in Theodore Roosevelt National Park. On September 25th, 2023, Theodore Roosevelt National Park released their draft environmental assessment, or EA. While it seems clear to all of us that they did not take those 19,000 comments into consideration, they did. Within the draft EA, you will find the responses to the request to keep the horses within the boundaries of the park. If you do not agree with those responses and have factual data to support your reasons why, that is what you should comment on during this public comment period. There also is some confusion. You can send the same documentation you sent last time if it was factual, historical, whatever the significance. And I will apologize. I've been talking so much all week. My throat is very tired. So you don't have to have new information to support your facts. If you have factual information, we're just asking them to take a look again. So what's new since this process started in September? Yesterday, the park announced their plans to extend the comment period. So the current comment period now ends on November 24th. A key to note here, and they didn't say this last time, so your comments have to be submitted through the website, which I'll show you later, or mailed, which we knew you can do, but they specified on here they would have to be postmarked by November 24th. So if you're putting them in the mail, just make sure that if you take it to the post office, I would take it up to the counter and have them stamp it. NPS 2022H is also new. If you don't know what this document is, I strongly suggest that you go to our website and download it. It is no longer available on the park's planning website, and when you read it, you will see why. This document talks about a meeting that the park had with, it shows you on here the in-person attendees. So higher level management of the park, and how they discussed literally how they were going to connect the dots for the public on why the horses had to leave the park. It's a very damning document and something everybody should read, and I will reference this throughout the presentation. I commented last time and it seems like the park's not listening. Why should I bother to comment again? I've heard so many people say this, and the number one reason I'm going to tell you, the freedom of just under 200 wild horses is exactly why you should comment. Also, this is something interesting to note. 43 CFR 46110C states the responsible official must, whenever practical, use a consensus-based management approach to the NEPA process. This means that the National Park Service should consider any consensus-based alternatives put forth by those participating persons, organizations, or communities who may be interested in or affected by the proposed action. And where the decision maker finds that the consensus-based alternative, if any, is not the preferred alternative, He or she must state the reasons for this determination in the environmental document. What this means is the more consensus we can build around a certain alternative, the better, because the National Park Service has a regulatory duty to seriously consider any such alternative or explain why it hasn't. Your comment also needs to be part of the public record. Every comment counts. So I wanted to start with just a brief overview for anyone who doesn't know. And again, if you have questions, feel free to ask about what NEPA is. NEPA is the National Environmental Policy Act. It's a procedural statute. It does not dictate outcomes. But NEPA's key requirement on agencies is that they must take a hard look at direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts. They must consider a reasonable range of alternatives to the proposed action, including a no-action alternative, which for us at Theodore Roosevelt National Park is alternative A, and where the 35 to whatever it is, 60 or 70 horses comes in. They must prepare an environmental impact statement, EIS, if impacts to the affected resource will be significant. So we're really pushing for them to do an EIS. The park keeps saying that an EA is sufficient. We don't understand how removing 200 horses from the park would not have a significant impact on the environment. And they must respond to substantive public comments. A key line to remember is that NEPA requires agencies to take a hard look at direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts. That hard look is something that they need to do, and we're not sure that that's happened in this EA. The EIS versus an EA. NEPA requires an EIS where impacts will be significant. So comments should highlight with evidence, studies, or personal anecdotes where possible, why impacts will be significant to the resources, such as economic impacts to local governments and residents, wildlife and wildlife habitat, historic and cultural resources, and ecologically critical areas. A few tips for preparing strong NEPA comments. Make your comments as concrete as possible, including explaining how the proposed action would harm or impair your interest in specific ways. Propose specific alternatives to the action that could achieve the stated purpose and need, rather than merely urging consideration of more alternatives in the abstract. Attach documents to your comments rather than simply providing a link to a website. Timely submit your comments. Also, it would not be a bad idea for everyone to look at the Citizen's Guide to NEPA, and it is available online. We have that on our website. Alternatives. NEPA requires agencies to examine a reasonable range of alternatives to the action. So reminder, when you're proposing other alternatives, be concrete in what you're suggesting. Inadequate mitigation. NEPA requires agencies to mitigate impacts or explain why it will not do so. Comments to the ineffectiveness of proposed mitigation measures and/or best management practices should be tied to scientific literature or credible evidence. Mitigation measures include avoiding the impact altogether by eliminating the action or parts of the action, minimizing impacts by limiting the degree or magnitude of the action and its implementation, or 3, by rectifying the impact by repairing, rehabilitating, or restoring the adverse effect on the environment. So what should you comment? There's a lot of confusion about this, and I'm hoping to clear some of that up for anyone that has questions about this. So again, we'll be open to questions afterwards. When people provide comment on information that is not actually provided in the in the environmental assessment, it's that those comments are not going to be as helpful for us. That's something that Superintendent Richmond said yesterday in an interview with KX News. So if you're going to comment on things that they didn't address in the EA, that's not helping them. That includes saying things like, I'm not coming to the park if you take the horses away. they didn't answer about me specifically, but they have answered that in the EA. So look at how you're responding. It's just really important right now. And then Senator Hoeven the other day said, given the significant interest in maintaining the wild horses at the park, members of the public should have ample opportunity to review the draft EA and provide meaningful input on any proposed changes to the management plan. He also was pushing really hard for a 30-day extension. And he said a 30-day extension of the comment period is necessary to ensure members of the public are able to contribute to a well-informed decision related to the future management of the wild horses in the park. Comments should be well-informed, meaningful, answer to what has been proposed in the draft EA, and speak to the future management of the horses in the park. So this slide has been going around, and I want to talk about this because this has created a little bit of confusion, and I hope that we can clear that up. This first highlighted sentence, provide information on how you use the park and how particular proposals in the planning document would affect that use. So people are telling others to say, you know, what them taking the horses from the park is going to mean to you and the way that you use the park. That's fine, but that cannot be your only comment. The next part of that, if you look, they're looking for substantive comments, and those are the ones they're going to respond to. All comments that receive the same basic message will be responded collectively, and that's how we got answers in the EA. But substantive comments are those that question with reasonable bias the accuracy of information in the NEPA document. And that's what we've been doing. We've been showing that on our website quite a bit. Question with reasonable basis the adequacy of the environmental analysis. Present reasonable alternatives other than those presented in the NEPA document, or cause changes or revisions to the proposal. So again, make sure that your comments have substance to them and are being supported by scientific, historical, cultural facts. So again, substantive, having a firm basis in reality and therefore important, meaningful, or considerable. So that should be the backbone of your comments. I'm not coming back to the park if the horses are removed. That comment or any form of that comment on its own will go into the garbage pile. It's not, it doesn't contain any substance. It's not going to help them make a decision. We need to
interrupt you for a second here, Chris, because we're getting some feedback. We need Jackie and Diana Barkman to please mute yourselves. Thank you, Jackie.
Okay, so this comment on its own, this comment is fine to add in with your comments, but you have to have other facts in there. If you're just sending this simple comment to the park, you're wasting your time and theirs because this is not helping the horses. Why? As we said earlier, comments should highlight with evidence, studies, or personal anecdotes where possible why impacts will be significant to resources such as economic impacts, wildlife and wildlife habitat, historical and cultural resources, or ecologically critical areas. I can't stress this enough. Please don't vote. This is not a vote. We don't have to pick one of their alternatives. None of the alternatives allow for a genetically viable herd of horses. So we personally, Chasing Horses Wild Horse Advocates, will not support any of them. Two of the alternatives completely eliminate the horses, and one will mean the removal of at least 150 horses from the park. From the Theodore Roosevelt public scoping comment period, this was not a vote counting process, and the emphasis was on the comment's content rather than the number of times a comment was received. So the report was a summary of the comments received and not a statistical analysis. So they're not taking votes for A. So we shouldn't vote A just because that allows horses to stay in the park. It does not allow for a genetically viable herd of horses. It means, and they said this in their public comment period, their civic engagement meeting, that would mean 150 horses have to be removed from the park. And removals will happen with helicopters. And if the horses don't sell, they will be euthanizing them. So Alternative A is not an option. From the TRMP Public Scope and Comment Report, all comments were read and considered, and relevant comments will be used to help refine the proposed alternatives. So make sure your comment is relative. Make sure there's some backbone to what you're telling them. So where do we start? First of all, I didn't put this in here, and I guess it was, I thought, like, unspoken, but park needs to consider an alternative that allows for a genetically viable herd of horses to stay within the park. Even if you said that before, and we know that they said in the EA they're not allowing that, you still need to say that in your environmental assessment. Just because the park said things in the EA, we know doesn't mean that they're true, doesn't mean that they're all factual, and doesn't mean that it's the right decision. So if you stated that before, restate it here. They need to allow for a genetically viable herd of horses to remain into the park. We know from Gus Catherine, who spoke specifically to our horse herd here, that number is between 150 and 200 horses. And I know, Heather, I know that Eric Mulbauer talked at the conference that number is actually higher, and that number is for reproductive horses. And it could be a whole nother topic for another time. There's a lot of question about the sterility and the gynecon experiment and what we have for reproductive mares currently in the park. So where else to start? Read the draft environmental assessment. I've read it a few times now, and I've been trying to share as many comments and blogs and answer as many questions as I can, but everyone needs to read it. A big reason why is not only reading the draft environmental assessment, but reading those documents that they release that are their reference points. I'm one person, and it's going to be hard for me to get through all of this. Sometimes you guys will see something that I didn't, and that will help all of us in the process. So, more eyes on this is great. And even for an example, this week, most of my week was spent working on the legislation that we were hoping was going to get passed in our North Dakota legislature. So I didn't put a lot of time this week into anything with this. So anyone read the supporting documents that they gave us, where they cited in here. And if you come up with anything or see anything or have questions, feel free to email me or message us on social media. The first thing everyone should talk about is livestock. That's what happened, and they put the horses into a livestock classification, and we know they're not livestock. So I do have, this is from the NPS 2022H document. And this is them talking about the issue with the livestock. They know it's a problem, and they've come up with a narrative to fix that, is basically what this says. This is something that our lawyers have said repeatedly in our comment letter. The wild horses in Theodore Roosevelt National Park are plainly excluded from the NPS's definition of livestock for several different reasons. First, they have never been formally designated as livestock, a necessary prerequisite under NPS's own regulations, and that's the truth. So we have been asking repeatedly for this, and they don't give us it, so we don't think it exists. So they have not properly classified these horses as livestock, so they can't just go around changing labels when they want. That's not right. So this needs to be addressed, and everybody should write this in their comment period. The other thing is, the park has never fed, sheltered, or provided veterinary care or other kinds of care to the wild horses, which have uniquely adapted to survive North Dakota's harsh winters. The Theodore Roosevelt National Park horses have never been raised on a farm or ranch. They have not been raised as a food animal. They are not and have never been owned or held in private ownership. So the wild horses in Theodore Roosevelt National Park are not livestock pursuant to federal and state law. So they cannot call them wild horses. They cannot call them livestock. They are wild horses. And this is an easy argument that everybody should make in their comment letter. The next thing is the purpose and need statement. So the purpose and need is the range of feasible alternatives determined by the purpose and need for the action. Comments can challenge an overly narrow purpose and need where it is not reasonably supported. And this is something everyone should put in their comments. Theodore Roosevelt National Park's purpose and need action is to address livestock, horse and cattle herds within the park under relevant laws, regulations, policies, and management priorities, including the conservation of the native species and the natural prairie ecosystem functions. Everything goes back to the purpose and need statement. So the park has not defined a natural prairie ecosystem for us. We don't know if they're talking about the natural prairie ecosystem that existed over 6,000 years ago. We don't know if it's the natural prairie ecosystem that Theodore Roosevelt experienced while he was in North Dakota. So that has not been clearly defined in the environmental assessment. And if you look at this, these are just different points throughout this is, I think, most of the alternatives they dismissed, but everything goes back to the purpose and need. Every single one of these says this analysis was not brought forward because it doesn't meet the purpose and need statement. The park's purpose and need also omits any reference to the historical and cultural value of this herd, which brings us to a whole nother point. The Section 106 review process. This has to do with the Historic Federal Preservation Act, and we spoke a lot about this over the last couple of weeks in our blogs. We found out last week that the State Historic Preservation Office was doing a review of the proposed action at Theodore Roosevelt National Park to decide if the horses are culturally and historically significant. This is a hot topic and needs to be in your comment letter. We know from the NTS 22H that the park was very concerned about this. Well, they were aware of it. They didn't seem concerned. So, and right here it says one of the things from that document, the group discussed Section 106 timing and the concept of animals being eligible to be considered cultural property. There is no case law, but there was a concurring opinion from a judge at a U.S. military base in Japan that the whales, who I think actually now are cultural property, but so I can find that out for sure, and we can use that as a citation. But this Amy Doohan, who was in here, was at the meeting, is actually an attorney from the Department of Interior. So that shows you how far this is going with the elimination of the horses. There is a Section 106 compliance review required under federal law. So from the NPS 2022H document, Section 106 review process will be done after scoping, but well before the EA is ready for public view. That didn't happen. This is a letter that you can see was dated the other day from the State Historical Society by the State Historic Preservation Office, William Peterson. So in here, he says, the North Dakota State Historic Preservation Office requests that Theodore Roosevelt National Park conduct further analysis discussing how the herds contribute to the cultural landscapes and biotic cultural resources as they relate to historic properties, including Elkhorn Ranch. So they sent the file back to the park for clarification. And in here too, you see they reference page D2 of the livestock plan. They're calling attention to the inadequacy of the Park Service claim that managing the herd for historical and cultural significance was not brought forward for further analysis because it does not align with NPS priorities. We believe that the State Historic Preservation Officer letter directs Theodore Roosevelt that they need to provide further analysis discussing the contribution of the herds to the cultural landscape and cultural resources relating to historic properties. This will require some time, and this actually may push them into an environmental impact statement before the State Historic Preservation Officer can give a final outcome. So that's how big this is. So this is a very big deal and something that everybody should be commenting in their letter about the historical and cultural significance. And Dr. Castle McLaughlin's report is an excellent resource for this. That's also available on our website. And the MHA Nation sent their own resolution to the park earlier this year. And in that, they said the MHA Nation holds horses in high esteem as horses are significant to the MHA people and have played a major role in MHA history, tradition, and culture. And the MHA Nation recognizes the wild horses running free in the park require genetic diversity and responsible herd management policies and techniques to maintain the health of the herd. So that's also interesting because when you listen to the civic engagement meeting and you see all of the documentation, the park always says, we're talking to the tribes and we're talking to the governor and we're talking to the legislators. And this is something that the MHA Nation came out and directly sent us to the park. So how much are they talking and listening is a good question, I think. Fact check the EA. So this is something we've been doing. We've made a big deal about it. We're lucky that I've got a number of reporters that will talk to me and help us expose these lies, that literally blatant lies, and that's a quote from me in this article. So make sure that you're fact checking everything in the EA. We found a lot of discrepancies. We've shared them in our blog. So this was one example. Another example, everyone knows this quote from Theodore Roosevelt, correct? In a great many indeed, in most localities, there are wild horses to be found, which although invariably of domestic descent, being either themselves runaways from some ranch or Indian outfit, or else claiming such for their sires and dams, yet are quite as wild as the antelope on whose domain they have intruded. If you look at the 2022 H document, this is what they said. While Theodore Roosevelt noted there were horses and cattle on the landscape, his stronger overreaching message for his body of work was his conservation mindedness. Roosevelt viewed horses as an intrusion or runaway on the landscape, as quoted in the 1978 EA. So that's a very simple thing to show you. Take what they're saying, don't take what they're saying as absolute fact. We need to fact check them, and that's what this process is for. Tourism is another hot button. We've all been looking for quantitative facts about tourism. The park actually gave them to us in the Brownlee report. I put this on our website. I've downloaded all the documents that they released as soon as we found that NPS 22H, because we knew that things were going to start disappearing, and that NPS 2022H document did. So this report is on the park's website. We also have it on our website. And what happened in this report, in case you're not sure, is they had a company come in and do a visitor survey of people coming in and out of the parks. And I know that myself and my husband took this survey personally. So what they said in the EA is that only 49% of visitors to the park support the ongoing presence of wild horses in the South Unit. And if you look at this report on the right side, it says strongly support 49%. But then there's also a column for support and somewhat support. And when you add that up, you're at over 89% of visitors who support the horses staying in the park. And when you read their statement about only 49% of visitors want them to stay, you automatically assume then 51% of visitors must be opposing that. And no, we see here it's only about 4% that oppose horses in the park. Not only that, but in the strongly support column, if you look at the top, it says the highest value in each row has been highlighted. So of, I think it was 22 different things that the park asked visitors, the number one thing that visitors strongly supported was maintaining a herd of horses in the South Unit of the park. That was number one out of everything else that they had asked. So this is something that the park has vetted as a viable report. This is quantitative tourism information that they have accepted. And if they accepted it literally to lie to us, we can now use that to restate it as the fact that it actually is. Be original in your comments. If you are going to sign on to form letters, great. I would take the time to either copy and paste that form letter and make it your own somehow, or just make sure that you get an original comment in. If they get form letters in, all of those form letters go into one pile, and that equals one comment. So for example, last comment period, we said there were over 19,000 comments. By the time they took form letters out and things like that, they ended up with, I think it was between 5,000 and 7,000 comments. That's a big drop. So that's also people saying, I'm not coming to the park if you take them, and then that's their comment. Those things all pushed aside left them with 5,000 to 7,000 comments that had substance, that was actually doing what they had asked for. We do have a couple calls to action on our website. The first one, and I know everybody's doesn't like Secretary Holland. I agree with you 100%. But the way that we worded our email to Secretary Holland is the park added to their purpose and need statement that the Bison Initiative. And what we're telling Secretary Holland, because when we looked at the Bison Initiative paperwork, number one, there's nowhere in there that says that they have to eliminate horses from an area. Number two, they're asking that bison be returned to areas, and the bison were removed in were reinstated into the park in the 50s. So good job, Theodore Roosevelt National Park, for being ahead of the 2008 initiative on this. So we want Secretary Holland to know that the park is doing a great job with the bison initiative, and she should let them know that the horses are equally culturally significant to this area, especially in the Dakotas, where we have, tribes that consider themselves the horse nation. So again, I can email Secretary Holland myself. She's not going to care. If 100 or 1,000 people email Secretary Holland, it could make a difference, and we never know when that difference is going to be made. The second thing is to send a letter to the North Dakota State Historic Preservation Office. And we actually have also updated this, and we've got this information on our website. You can send a letter to them, or you can sign on to our petition. I was going to close this out earlier, but now that they've already sent back for more information to the park, this will be open until November 3rd, and then we will send the petition to the Historic Preservation Office. We do have over 2,000 signatures already, so that's great. But again, could we get 3,000? Can we get 4,000? On that State Historic Preservation Office investigation they're doing, public comment matters. So this is somewhere where the park is removed from the outcome of the situation. And so really making your voice heard here is really important right now. I want to show you just a few resources that we have. So let me go to, I don't know. Where do I want to go? Yep, there it is. All right. So if you go to our website, CHWHA.org, we do have a link that says Save the TRMP Wild Horses. On here, you will find talking points that we put together for everybody. You can download it here. You can view it there. Here's the link now to get your comments in by November 24th. Someone gave me this document today on what is a substantive comment. Our 2023 comment letter is here, so this has some good resource information for you. The 1978 environmental assessment is another good document to look at. Not only is this document good to look at, but the big thing with this 1978 assessment is that at the end of it, the Department of Interior sent a BLM range specialist out to the park to look at the horses and see if there was another option. And everything that the park said in this 1978 environmental assessment, this guy debunked and said, hey, you could have more horses. Hey, the range is good. The horses look great. Like best horses I've seen. Like they're not inbred. They're, good genetics. And the park, of course, didn't listen then. There's a link to the National Academy of Sciences report. If you're not familiar with this, again, another awesome resource. It does say using science to improve the BLM wild horses. The BLM and the Park Service are all part of the Department of the Interior. And if you can't see by the park's actions that they are all working from the same book, same scenario, different days. Same with the BLM Wild Horse and Burro Handbook. There's a lot of good information in here. Dr. Castle McLaughlin's report. The Citizen's Guide to NEPA. This is a great resource for understanding this process. And then there's a couple other articles that I put up here the other day, this week, as new information's been coming to me. So these are things that may help you write your comment letter as well. I also do have comment letters that were shared with us from January of 2023. And again, I'm not saying to copy these in their entirety, but there are points made in all these different letters. For example, Steve and Joanna Martin's, theirs is very historically and culturally based. So if you're looking for points on that, they've got some great information in their letter that you may be able to use or research more for your letter. And just to give you just different insights or different views on different things people are saying, and also to show you that you don't have to make every point in your letter. Whatever it is that you're passionate about and you can speak to, and you've found the documentation to share, that's what you should talk about. I also wanted to show you that the parks planning page, if you go to their project home, it gives you an overview here. You can see here the comment period's been updated to November 24th, so we've got 35 days. When you go here to the open for comment, it will show you there the environmental assessment. So this is where you can download the document and view it. If you click the comment now button, this is where you can put your information in, and then you would literally copy and paste your document in here. How long should your comment letter be? I can tell you that I think last time we copy and pasted about 40 pages, 30 or 40 pages into this space. So your comment letter can be a page, it can be 10 pages, 2 pages, whatever it is you feel it needs to be to get your comment across. But the big thing is, this is your last chance to make a comment, make an impactful comment to save these horses. So what is it that you want the park to know? And I think that that is all that I have. So I am going to now make Heather the host, maybe, so that she can moderate, and then she's got stuff to share later. So
I think we just had a couple questions come up in the chat box, Chris. Have we discovered the real reason they want to remove the horses?
no, we don't ever know. I mean, so I always say, if you want some kind of a real reason, it goes back to toilet paper math. I used to be able to go to the grocery store and buy 6 rolls of toilet paper, and the package said I was buying 6 rolls of toilet paper. Now it says 6 equals 12 or 18 or whatever it is. And I don't understand why that is, right? Like, why can't you just let me buy 6 rolls of toilet paper? It's the same thing with the park. It's they're not native. It's the natural prairie ecosystem. It's the bison initiative. It's because they're livestock, and livestock aren't allowed on National Park Service lands. So I mean, they have an excuse for everything. And if you look, I really encourage everyone to look at that 2022 document, because it shows in there that they have a pre-planned excuse for everything, including if a judge says the horses have to stay. Like, they're prepared for anything. So they think. So
Kim is asking, she says when the BLM gets too many comments, they take a certain percentage and then do a sample of those comments. Do you know if Forest Service, and let's say National Park Service, does that as well, since they can't possibly read all 6,000 to 7,000 comments?
they said that they did in their they gave us a report every time after every comment period. They've given us a report kind of recapping what the comments were. So I can tell you this, and this is something that our lawyers corrected me on, because the first comment period we sent in a box of I think it probably weighed about 10 pounds of supporting documentation to our letter. And someone asked me, do they have to read all that? And I thought, well, no, maybe they just have to read what I quote. And our lawyer said, absolutely not. They have to read your answer is absolutely. They have to read they were responsible for every single page I sent them. So whether they read it or not is up to them. But if they don't read it, it can be still challenged in court because we sent them that information, if that makes sense.
Castle was saying that your YouTube channel should also be a source, that people should go watch it and learn what they can from it. So I went ahead and put the link for that in the chat box.
Yeah, so we've been trying to have different horse talks with different people just to keep engagement up, and also give you different perspectives on whether it's historical, cultural, scientific, whatever it is, just to help you understand the significance of these horses in the park in different ways. So yeah, thank you, Castle. That was great. And Castle's got a great video on there too. She was our first horse talk person. So
And I think one of the ones that maybe you guys should watch, because they do want to use Gonacon on the herd, correct, is watch the one
Yes.
with Dan Baker, where Chris, tell everybody what you asked him and what his answer was.
So, I asked him, he was explaining to us the Gynecon and what his intentions were. And it was sounding like, and again, when I say this, I'm going to say that I've been a very big critic of Dan Baker and this experiment, and very upset and pissed off about what has been happening to the horses. But when you listen to him talk, and I had Ginger Fedek from In Defense of Animals with me, who's another scientific researcher. He was explaining to us that they were trying to find a solution to wild horse management and long-term management. So when he explained about what their intentions were, different studies that they had done, and we heard him going on and on, all I could think about was like, this is like Dr. Frankenstein, right? Um, I said, and so I said that to him. I said, the only analogy I can come up with, and I hope you don't find this offensive, is that you're like a Dr. Frankenstein. And you've created something with a good intention, right? I mean, you were hoping that it helped wild horse, help with wild horse management. And now you have the BLM going rogue with, they get the horses, they give them an injection of Gonacon. 30 days later, they're boosting them. And you're telling us you have no science to back that. And I said in the park at the time was saying that they were giving every female horse 8 months old and up Gonacon. And I said, so is that what you're saying? And he said, yeah, that's an accurate analogy. And my mouth hit the floor. So those things should be challenged. And this is the person who led that experiment, saying this is not the intended use. We don't know what that outcome is, and there's nothing to prove it. That should be something that every advocate is screaming to the BLM in some way, shape, or form.
And because that video is up on her YouTube channel, you guys, you can watch it and quote him
Yes.
because he's perfectly aware that the video has been put out to the
Yep.
public. So anytime you are commenting either on TRNP or any BLM herd of wild horses where they intend to use Gonacon, and we know that they intend to do that with nearly every herd now, quote Dan Baker
Right.
in your public comment. When you're talking to your legislators, quote Dan Baker in your public comment. Absolutely. All right, I don't see any other questions about this. Leslie was wondering if parts of this will be made available. I did copy and paste some of the quotes about what you should include in your comments in the chat box, Leslie, and I will have this presentation available again as a recording. So if you want to watch it and pause it and read what these suggested comments are, you'll be able to do that. So anybody who wants a copy of the recording afterwards, just contact either Chris or myself and we can send that over to you.
And
All right, Chris, I hope
I'll try to put
go
the
ahead.
PDF up on our website too of the slides so people can look at that too.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. And when you do, let me know and I'll throw it up on Save Our Wild Horses too,
Okay.
so that people have it on both sides. I hope you can hang out with us for a few minutes as we talk about McCullough Peaks, just in case something else comes up in the chat box about TRNP.
Yep, no problem.
All right, you guys, I am going to up a quick little screen show I put together about McCullough Peaks, if I can get this thing to move out the way. Minimize that first. Try this again. All right, so if most of you don't know, McCullough Peaks is my wild horse heart herd. I've made an unprecedented for me 3 trips out to see the herd this year, May, July, and then again just last week or week before. The final decision record on McCullough Peaks was issued, and they do intend on rounding up this herd via bait and trap. The initial start date was November 1st. It has been pushed to November 15th. There was supposed to be a forthcoming press release on that from BLM. I checked earlier today and didn't see anything yet. So I just want to go over some action items that I put together with the help of Carol Walker and Sandy Sisti. They did a really great presentation with ECI a couple days ago. So I grabbed some of their suggested things you could do and I expanded on them a little bit to give you guys some more specific options. I also just wanted to share with you quickly some of the pictures that I took while I was out there last week. And pardon me if I start crying because it was really difficult to leave these guys this time. The cute little foal in the upper right-hand corner there belongs to Tough. She's a longtime mare in the herd. She's older. She has a wounded right front knee that I believe was wounded in 2019 that never healed. She has a baby almost every year. She's non-responsive to the native PZP darting. And this is her most recent foal, who is about 4 weeks old now. And then we've got another little foal up here in the left-hand corner who's with the small herd. Yeah, so I just wanted to share these with you guys. I have a few more pictures at the end to share as well, but it was a real treat to get to spend time with them one more time. When I mentioned to my husband that somebody wanted me to take them out there to see her heart horse, my husband said, absolutely, go for it. You need to see the new foals before the gather happens. All right, so after the presentation on Wednesday by ECI, I drew up this graphic really quick. And this was, again, well, number one is my idea. And it's something I always share with you guys because I still believe that really the only number one way that wild horse roundups are going to stop with the Bureau of Land Management is through Congress. You know, we can file lawsuits in that, but lawsuits often take a long time. And maybe they'll set a precedent and it might stop a certain part of the roundup process, like maybe not using helicopters, but allowing them to go out on horseback, which I'm sure ultimately they'll think is going to be real fun. But I always say Congress, Congress, Congress. And there are several representatives that we've talked to. We all know that Representative Cohen, Representative Titus are really big wild horse fans. Another one, and I've mentioned him a lot lately, is Representative Schweikert of Arizona. And I watched him in a webinar earlier this year where he stated that most of his fellow people in Congress don't know about the wild horses. And I know you guys are going to say, well, how come? Why don't they know? Surely they know. They don't know. That's what he says. He says they don't know. But he also said it's not his job to go around to his 434 fellow members of Congress and tell them what's going on. It's our job. Our representatives work for us. We each only have one representative. So it's not like a bunch of people to contact. It's one person. So for me, it's Jill Tokuda. She does Maui and Hawaii. You guys need to find out who your representative is, have their email, have their phone number, have their DC mailing address, and have their main state mailing address all written down on a piece of paper on your desk, something that you can look at and reference to all the time. And right now, what we're asking for is an immediate moratorium. And I remember Wild Horse Education wrote up something like this several months back, and I kind of grabbed on it and I've just sort of stuck with it. This is something you can very quickly call and say to your representative's office. And keep in mind, your representative is not going to pick up the phone. The phone is going to be answered by a 20-something intern or staffer. So you will be talking to somebody far younger than you, whose job is to answer the phone, take the messages, and pass those on to the representative. The more calls they get about a certain issue, the more likely they are to take that information and pass it to the representative so that the representative knows that his constituents are truly concerned about this particular issue. Receiving one call from one person probably isn't going to cut it unless you're continually making calls and giving them useful information. But what I would ask you guys to do, especially in the next few days, we are coming up on the weekend, so maybe early next week. I am calling Representative Tokuda today to ask her for an immediate moratorium on all wild horse and burro roundups until Congress can investigate the Bureau of Land Management's wasteful spending of taxpayer dollars and mismanagement of the wild horse and burro program. Then take that same message and go to their website, which I'm going to show you guys how to do in a second, and send that to them in an email as well. So you're double hitting them. Then if you can, have your spouse do it, have your partner do it, have your kids do it, have your friends and family do it. It's a quick 1-minute phone call. It just takes almost no time at all. But the more people that call in, the more of an impact it will actually make. Okay, number 2, and I did
Heather,
get
Heather, can I interrupt you for a minute? I want to say through this year and this whole process of trying to save the TRMP horses, I cannot stress to you enough, our representatives, whether it's state or federal, only know what they're told. And if you're not using your voice to speak, they only know what the BLM or the Park Service is saying. So what Heather is saying is right. Second of all of the representatives I talked to, and we talked to, I know, close to 250 representatives and congressional aides. All of them were very receptive to the information that we were giving them. And it helps. They aren't, when you think about what our representatives have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, it will give you an extreme headache. But they can't be experts in every single thing, and they aren't experts in wild horse advocacy. Um, I also want to say Senator John Hoeven has been very supportive of our wild horses here, which is very surprising in a very red state like North Dakota. But Heather, I think you also should mention that fact about, what one call equals and the power that we have in our voice. That was it, Marty Irby's quote. So I think you should stress that too, how
Yeah,
powerful your voice is.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think he said that if you make a phone call, a personal phone call to your representative, and especially if you request and have an appointment with that representative to speak to them directly, you're actually representing 5,000 of your fellow constituents. So when you think about how many people live in your area, the fact that you took the time to personally call and talk to them means that it's probably an issue that is important to a lot of constituents. And he said phone calls are the number one best way, and handwritten letter that's mailed in is the number two way. And it does take longer, especially when sent to the DC office because they have to test it and everything. But it really means that you took the time to personally write that letter, sign it, stick it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and mail it, and then follow it up by email, which is going to be the easiest way. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chris, for that. Um, okay, so if you have visited the town of Cody, Wyoming, specifically to see the wild horses, send an email and a letter to the Cody Chamber of Commerce about why you visited Cody and how much money you spent. Number 3, call Tracy. I see I spelled her name wrong. Tracy Stone Manning, and ask her to stop this roundup of the McCullough Peaks wild horses. I have built a page on the website for what you can say to her, and I'll share that link with you here momentarily. I want to reiterate that no matter who you talk to, be polite. I am absolutely appalled at some of the letters that the Cody BLM office has been receiving, specifically the gentleman who handles the wild horses there. Absolutely appalled at some of the letters that he's received. And you guys, I understand this is a completely contentious issue, but if we want to be taken seriously, we need to act seriously. I can guarantee you the ranchers and the livestock people are not calling these guys and just yelling at them and threatening their families. That's not happening. They're talking in a mature manner, and we need to do that as well. Number 4 that Carol and Sandy suggested is to contact media. They made it pretty broad. I'm narrowing it down to Wyoming at this point, but certainly a quick little letter to the editor, even to your local paper, to just bring awareness would help. But contact media and ask them to print a pro wild horse article about how much the McCullough Peaks wild horses mean, not only to the American public, but to the international public. I know a photographer that was out there not too long ago who bumped into people who had come from somewhere in Europe specifically to see the horses. That says a lot about how important these horses are.
Can
So
I
I'm
add
just going to
something?
cover,
Can
yeah,
I add? I'm sorry, Heather.
it's okay.
Something that I found out recently, um, and just from contacting our media, I believe that I'm sure a lot of cities, because North Dakota is just so much smaller, but we have our own AP reporter in the state of North Dakota, and his job is to bring national attention to issues that are important to our state. So I don't know how you find who that is within your area or your state, but that would be a great thing for Wyoming, because if it gets into the AP article for that state, there's a good chance that it will go national or international. The other thing is letters to the editor. Don't discredit that. Even if you don't live in Wyoming, it's not wrong to write a letter to the editor about the current plight of wild horses everywhere and specify that. You never know when that's going to make a difference. And I can tell you it absolutely made a difference to our state legislators passing the resolution earlier this year. So I'm sorry, Heather.
No, it's okay. Yeah, I actually think you guys, I have some samples of letters to the editor on the website that another advocate helped write earlier this year. And I'm going to tell you guys, most people don't even know we have wild horses. But once you find out, aren't you just completely drawn into it? I mean, you can't get out of it, right? They're just so beautiful. I can see some heads nodding. You just can't get out of it. I lived in Oregon for 13 years. I had no idea how many wild horse herds we had in that state. I didn't know it until 2020. And my entire life changed as soon as I found them. And my life it just completely revolves around wild horses and advocacy now. So, a quick little letter to the editor does get the word out there. And maybe people will start, looking into, oh, well, do I have wild horses nearby? Coincidentally, I also have a page on the website that tells you where you can find wild horses. And I'm working on, I've updated all the ones I've actually visited, which is close to 50. And as I go, I'm working to update how you can get to other herds. So that will help people find out where they are as well. Okay, so if you don't know who your representative is, you can go to this website here, house.gov/representatives/find your representative, or just simply Google who is my US representative, and that page will come up for you. Once you get to that page, this will open up. You just simply put in your zip code and then click find your rep by zip. And then this little box to the left will come up on the left-hand side of the screen. And what you'll see here is a little email envelope. The little TV sign to the left is the one I'm actually interested in for you guys, because that will take you to her website or his website. So once you get to their website, then you can look for the little contact tab, which could be at the top, it could be at the bottom. Once you click on that contact tab, it will give you a way to email them or contact them via the website. And yes, you will need to put in your name and address so that they can verify that you are in fact a constituent. And then generally down at the bottom of the homepage is where you'll find their DC mailing address and their local state mailing addresses. And if anybody needs help finding out who their representative is, you're welcome to email me and I'll give you a hand with that. And again, here's the script. So when you're calling, you're actually saying, I am calling Representative so-and-so today to ask him or her for an immediate moratorium. The only thing you need to do when sending in an email or using their contact me screen on the website is change calling to writing. I am writing Rep so-and-so today to ask him or her. And of course, specify whether it's a him or her. I think I just added this in just before the meeting because I was thinking about it. You could say this is especially timely with the highly unwarranted roundup of the McCullough Peaks wild horses that the BLM plans to start on November 15th. And I thought, that might actually resonate with some of them because with the great help of Joanne and Gretchen in July, helping me to write this fantastic 17-page letter, which is available for you to read on the website. We mailed those. I printed out all 17 pages and we mailed those to 250 of the representatives. So they might just recommend, see that herd name and go, you know what, I remember something about that from July. So it wouldn't hurt just to add it on there. And it also adds a bit of urgency to the situation. I know they're awfully distracted with things going on right now, but they still have a job to do for us. And this is an urgent and timely matter. Okay, then I got an email from a fellow advocate this morning who I think is on the call today. And she sent me an email and she said that she called the Cody Chamber of Commerce CEO and had an excellent conversation with him. He stated that they are totally on board with stopping the roundup and confirmed he will let BLM know he is still getting calls against this. Also stated he's received lots of calls. So once I saw that, I made the graphic to the left. And I think, again, this is just a quick 1 or 2 minute phone call, maybe a little bit longer. But if you can call the chamber, who I'm sure is closed this weekend, but put it on your schedule for Monday, Tuesday, and just let them know how much the horses mean to you, your family, and friends. How often you travel to Cody just to see the horses. I would mention Yellowstone at this point, because that they'll look at it as, oh, you're coming, you're also going to Yellowstone, blah, blah, blah. I would just keep this horse related. So how often you travel to Cody to see the horses or that you plan to. I've talked to a lot of people who are planning to go see the horses next year, and they're wondering if they should because they're wanting me to tell them how many are going to be left. And of course, we have no idea how many are going to be left. So even if you're planning to go, put a figure together and say, this is how much money I spent when I went there, or how much money I figure my trip is going to cost me when I go next year. Include your hotel costs. These are things that are local to Cody, so not necessarily your plane ticket, but include your hotel costs, the cost to rent a vehicle, the cost for gas, the cost for food, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then the cost if you plan to do a little bit of shopping for some mementos or something. Somebody asked me for just a general quote this morning, and I said for about a 5-night stay, maybe something around $2,000 for a hotel that costs about $150 a night. You could also just quickly talk about how the horses are not overpopulated, that there are so many of the horses in the herd that are older in age that we do expect many of them to die over the next 2 winters. How if the BLM, and you always do want to say Bureau of Land Management, not just BLM, does what they plan to do, that the herd may collapse from not having any genetic viability. So the herd is presently at about 183, 185. They figure there's 173 adults, breeding adults. The number they've thrown out is to remove 63. But if BLM really gets their way, that what they'll do is they'll actually take it down to low AML, which is just 70 horses. Then if they take the mares that they bring in, treat them with Gonacon and permanently sterilize them and release them, and then only leave the older stallions and so forth out there, but keep all the younger ones because they're more adoptable, that herd's just going to collapse. It'll collapse. It won't be able to help it. And what if a really, really terrible winter comes around in 3 or 4 years? We'll lose bands of horses like we did up in Stewart Creek and Lost Creek this past winter, where you're driving around and there's a whole band of horses that passed away due to the cold weather. So those are things that you can bring up. End your conversation on a positive note and talk about having the wild horses outside of Cody is a positive thing for tourism dollars on the economy. You're ending it with a positive thing so that he's looking at it as a good thing. Having the wild horses there is a good thing. Yes, BLM is not intending to zero the herd out entirely, but you still want them all there and you want them at a genetically viable level. So I did put that information on there. This graphic is up on my personal page for those of you that I'm Facebook friends with. It's also up on the website and on my Facebook page and on the Instagram. So if you want to take a look at it or share it, that would be great. But don't waste your time. We're at the 20th of October and this gather is set to happen November 15th. So okay, then if you want to, you can call Director Tracy Stone Manning and politely urge her to intercede on behalf of the McCullough Peaks wild horses and stop the proposed roundup and removal that will lead to their extinction. So when we say lead to their extinction, again, I'm referring back to if they do remove 63 horses or they take it down to the absurd low level of 70 horses, it's going to be really hard for that herd to recover with the use of Gonacon. And given how many horses in that herd are elderly. So a third of the herd is over the age of 15, 22 are over the age of 20. Many of the horses there die somewhere between the ages of 22 and 26. And 26 is old for a wild horse out on the range. I mean, we know some that have lived longer, like Old Man and Oniki and that, but there were some stallions over this past winter who were just about 22 years old, which I think is what Booker Rose was, and he's confirmed to have passed at the McCullough Peaks herd this past winter. So if they leave just those older horses out there, again, collapse of the herd. Genetic viability of the herd is a real concern. Talk about Dr. Gus Cothran. You can Google him, get his information off of Chris's research page and bring that up. Another awful thing they're doing this time around, McCullough Peaks has to be bait trapped because I believe it's in the herd management area plan, but instead of watching the trap in person, they're going to watch it from the office. So a remote camera will, I can see Karen shaking her head. A remote camera will be watching, and when a horse goes in, they'll push a button remotely to have the gate closed. Well, what happens if a horse gets stuck? It could be, depending on where they put the trap, from the Cody BLM office out to Whistle Creek Road at McCullough Peaks, it's between 20 to 25 minutes. Then you got to get onto the roads and get down to the trap. So it could conceivably take them an hour to get out there, especially if there's winter conditions going on. So disagree with the whole remote bait trapping plan. That is not at all acceptable and very dangerous for the horses. Talk about how this is one of the most beloved herds in the country. And people from all around the world travel to Cody to visit them. I like to say if this herd is gathered, because McCullough Peaks has been a success story when it comes to native PZP. And I'm not going to get into an argument about birth control at all right now, but I'm just going to say to you guys that because this herd has used native PZP, the original form that does not disrupt band dynamics, this herd has not been rounded up since 2013. That means that for 10 years now, they've been allowed to stay out there, grow their family bands, love each other, spend time together, be wild and free out on the range. So if they take this herd and they reduce them like they plan to, talk to her about how the American and international public will lose even more faith in the Bureau of Land Management's ability to properly run the Wild Horse and Bureau program, which we know that they just seem completely unable to do. And then my last point there, I talked about how the herd's been successfully darted with just a 2% growth rate. The last couple of years have been a little bit higher with foals, but that's because of COVID and they weren't able to go out and dart as much as they normally would have. But again, with the number of horses over the age of 15 and over the age of 20, these foals are just going to replace the ones that we're going to lose over the next winter or two. And we actually expect the numbers to drop much closer down to what they consider an appropriate high management level of 140. Which is still not the 150 that you need for a genetically viable breeding herd. I'm going to repeat, be polite. As advocates, we need to stop with the yelling and the threats because this will only hurt the horse's chances. Would you do something for someone who yells at you? No, probably not. It's the last thing you'd want to do is help them out. So don't yell at her, don't yell at anyone else. Stop with the threats, stop with the yelling. Stop with the all capital letters, stop with the multiple exclamation points. You can make your point without doing all of that, and you can make it strongly without doing threats and yelling. Again, I can guarantee you the ranchers and the Public Lands Council, who is all made up of ranchers, do not do that. So we need to follow suit and be looked at as being mature and professional as well. Bait trapping set to start on November 15th. I was on Oahu a couple days ago for a quick one-night stay, and we were driving down back to the airport, and I saw a plaque on a statue on the side of the road while we were stopped at a stoplight. I couldn't grab my camera quick enough quite to grab it, but what it said was, I as an individual and you as an individual can make the difference. A bunch of us individuals together comes to, but I'm just one person, said 300 million people. Right? And that quote was written by Sandy Sharkey, and I absolutely love it, and I use it all the time, and she's right. Please don't sit there and think that everybody else on this call or everybody else on Facebook is going to take these actions. You need to take these actions as well. Fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. That's something that Chris shared on her personal page today, and I thought that says a lot about advocacy too. All right. These are the pictures I took on the last day I was out there. And this was of the small herd. They were in a valley. I bumped into another photographer out there who was crying, and I don't blame her one bit. We had a good cry. We watched the horses for a while. We talked about them. They were all just calm and peaceful. They don't know what's coming. This black horse on the left is my personal wild heart horse Jetstream with his little band of 4, including the stallion Two Socks and the mares Sunrise and Tequila, who are a mother-daughter pair. Jetstream is the lieutenant. Jetstream has a condition with his front fetlocks where they're both swollen. Somebody made a promise to me that if he's pulled into the bait trapping pen that he will be released. I don't put a lot of faith in that. Certainly, if this were any other roundup, he would be put down immediately just because of his condition. And we certainly don't want that to happen. So if you visit saveourwildhorses.net, the second tab up at the top, just click on Take Action Now. I have all of these action items up there for you guys to look at and read, including the address to the chamber, the email address, et cetera, et cetera. And if anybody has any questions, you're more than welcome to call me. And I'll go through the chat box here in just a second, but I again want to thank Chris and Chasing Horses Wild Horse Advocates for all of the hard work and tremendous strides that you're taking, Chris. to help save the Theodore Roosevelt National Park wild horses. I wish I had all of the energy that Chris does. Honestly, she's just, I don't have enough words for how much work Chris is doing. It's absolutely fantastic. Okay, so let me run through these and see if anybody has any questions. Chris, stay on hand. I'm guessing when the Zoom user says who is darting there at McCullough Peaks, presently it is Abel, who's actually with BLM Cody. I have bumped into him a couple times. I had a long conversation with him back in May. He is, to my knowledge, he's the only one darting them right now. Are these facts on the Save Our Wild Horses site? Yes, Diane. Just go to saveourwildhorses.net, click on Take Action Now. Don't scroll down and click on the McCullough Peaks options. Those were presentations I did earlier this year. Just simply click on the tab for Take Action Now, and that will take you to the current page that does have this information on it. And from Angela F., it's also helpful to contact the state director of BLM Wyoming. He's the one who can actually put a moratorium in place. Maybe we can start an action item on this, please, please. Yeah, definitely, Angela. I'll make one up. See if I can find his information, do a graphic, and put it out this weekend. Thanks for the suggestion. Deborah says, yes, called Thursday and talked about how important the horse tourism must be. I think she's saying that the CEO at the chamber was extremely in favor and happy that she called. Well, it helped to call our senators too. Honestly, right now, not so much, Tina. This is more in the hands of the representatives because they're the ones who give the budget to BLM. So not so much presently at this time. Concentrate on your representative. And when you guys do call your representative's office and you do talk to a staffer or aide, you can also ask which staffer or aide in the office has to do with public lands, natural resources, or third choice being animal issues. And keep in mind too, they might say to you, but we're in Indiana, what does this matter? It matters because public lands belong to every American, no matter what state you live in. And it matters because every single American, no matter what state you live in, your taxpayer dollars are being used to fund these roundups. So yes, it matters. And anytime you say that taxpayer dollars are being wasted, that's what is going to perk a representative's ears. So use that phrase a lot. Use it a lot. Start with this initial phone call, get the name and email address of a staffer or intern that you can keep in touch with. And very soon, I'm going to be providing you guys with some extra information and letters that you can send to them. It will be things about why to stop the roundups, how the taxpayer dollars are being wasted, how just 5 ranching contractors are making millions and millions and millions of dollars off the backs of taxpayers every year, about how countries all around the world are using wild horses to regenerate and for grazing conservation as opposed to removing them. Like they're actually taking horses and putting them in countries, wild horses that didn't have them before, because they understand the importance of how wild horses help the land. So anyways, I'll be having some letters come out, sort of one at a time. I might even send you guys an article and ask you to print it and send it in, like the one about the BLM whistleblower in California that just came out. Do you know how many have commented already? Joanne, is this on TRNP, I assume? Chris, do you know by chance?
I think they said in the meeting they had last week, I want to say they said about 2,000 people had commented.
So it's probably good we have the extension then. So don't hesitate, you guys. And if you want to take your comment that you're submitting on the TRNP horses and just even change it slightly and submit one on behalf of your husband with his permission, do that. I do it all the time on behalf of my husband. There's always one that comes from me and one that comes from my husband. I just change it slightly so that, it's 2 comments for one. Can't beat it. Are you still planning the Wyoming trip next June? I hope so. I'll get back to you guys on that, Nancy. It's something I'm still thinking about. So we'll see. I might even move it to September, but it's something I do want to take a bunch of you guys out to see the McCullough Peaks herd. I want to take you all down to Saltwells Creek, which is they're in my top 5 favorite herds. One of only 2 that has curly genetics. So curly coated, curly mane and tailed horses. Saltwells Creek is just absolutely gorgeous. It's 1.1 some odd million acres, and BLM plans to zero them out. So that's going to take them some time to do. There's a whole thing going on in Wyoming and Rock Springs about a resource management plan, but I want to get you guys out to see those horses and see McCullough Peaks. So I might put something together sometime next year and just see if y'all want to join me. Has anyone talked to Tracy Stone Manning, or do you just get staff? Diane, to my knowledge, Scott Beckstead called earlier today and had to leave a voicemail. So if anybody on here was actually able to talk to her staff, you're welcome to put your hand up really quick, and I'll ask you what they said. But I think for the most part, you're probably just going to get a voicemail on that one. As Deborah says, I never get through at Tracy's recording. It always says to email them. To my knowledge, I don't know if any of us actually have her email, though. Did they share that on the voicemail, Deborah Clemente, by chance? If they did, go ahead and unmute yourself and let me know, because I haven't been able to find an email for her. Some of us have been looking and we haven't been able to find one. And Angela, I was just out at McCullough Peaks week before last. So that was my last trip for the year, my last travel for the year, actually. So no. All right, you guys, if there's no other questions, we're running at about an hour and 20 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. And again, if you want a copy of the recording, please just let either Chris or myself know. Getting back into advocacy now this fall and with winter coming. So although it's not quite winter here on Hawaii, but I will be holding more meetings now and trying to get this letter writing plan that channels Wild Horse Annie. I just figure that if back in the 1950s and 60s, Wild Horse Annie could get 50,000 people, adults and children, to send letters to Congress, I'm completely flabbergasted that we can't get it done today. In a day and age where we have so much more access to just people in general through our social media. So I just want to see if we can channel her a little bit and maybe get a big letter writing campaign going. I am postponing it a tiny bit just because of everything going on in the house. Let them get settled down, and of course with what's going on overseas. But again, no matter what, they have to keep listening to us. They are always working for us. So I will get that up and going soon. And if anybody would like to help with anything, you're more than welcome to email me, because I am just one person, just like Chris said. We're both just one person each. So we can always use some help time and again, although there's a couple